After I bought my house, I cried until I had no tears left. My monthly mortgage payment is over 3,700 yuan. I've been paying for 5 years, but I still owe 640,000 yuan. The worst part? My house is now only worth 540,000 yuan, less than what I still owe the bank. It feels like I'm just working for the bank every day. What's the point of working so hard? Is it just to pay the mortgage? Since I bought the house, I haven't eaten out once. For breakfast, I just eat a single egg. I'm scared to spend money on anything because I worry about not being able to make the next payment. People say buying a home brings happiness and a better life, but after buying mine, I don't feel any happiness at all.
This man bought a home in Hangzhou in 2019. He never expected property values to drop so dramatically. After paying the mortgage for 5 years, much of his money has essentially disappeared. Even if he sells the house now, it won't be enough to pay off what he still owes. China's economy is facing a sharp downturn, and many industries are struggling. The once booming real estate market is now in decline, with property prices falling across the country. Middle-class families who once enjoyed financial stability are now feeling the strain. Many are seeing their incomes drop, leaving them unable to manage their mortgage payments. As property values plunge, some homes are now worth less than the remaining loan amounts. Faced with this overwhelming pressure, many families have no choice but to stop paying their mortgages. When that happens, the bank seizes their homes, and the owners are blacklisted as dishonest debtors. Financial ruin has even led to family breakdowns and divorces. A Wuhan real estate agent gave an example.
Do you know how many people in Wuhan have stopped paying their mortgages? Just this month, at least 600 families. It's heartbreaking. Right now, Wuhan has over 110,000 foreclosed homes, and the number keeps growing every day. The core issue is a rapid decline in property values. Let me share a real case. A homeowner in the Polytimes community who worked in education and training lost his job. In 2019, at the height of the housing boom, he bought a 108 square meter apartment for 38,000 yuan per square meter, 4.2 million total. He took out a 2.9 million yuan loan. After paying for 4 years, he still owes 2.8 million. The current price in that neighborhood has dropped to 20,000 yuan per square meter. Even if he sells the apartment, he still owed the bank 700,000 yuan. In 4 years, he lost everything. No job, no savings. His wife left, taking their child. He told me he'd rather ruin his credit than keep paying the mortgage. And he's not alone. Many neighbors have also stopped paying. It's tragic. I've been in real estate here for 13 years, and I've seen too many people lose everything over one wrong purchase. They didn't do anything wrong. They made the best decision they could at the time. If you are buying a home in Wuhan right now, please be cautious. One wrong step, and you could end up on the same path.
The misfortune of this family is just one example among millions of middle-class households in China that have fallen back into financial hardship due to housing. Across the country, countless families are struggling with declining incomes and plummeting property values. Chinese banks have reported rising default rates on mortgage loans in 2024. As homeowners find themselves unable to repay their mortgages, banks have been auctioning off a growing number of foreclosed properties. According to a recent report from the China Index Academy, 370,000 foreclosed homes were listed for sale in 2024, up from 364,000 in 2023. Of these, 117,000 were successfully sold. Official data shows that the number of foreclosed homes has been steadily increasing since 2020, with a 43% jump in 2023 alone. This trend has continued into 2024. Meanwhile, property prices are still falling rapidly. Media reports suggest that home prices across China have dropped by about 30% from their 2021 peak. Data from the China Index Academy shows that, as of January 2024, second-hand home prices in 100 key cities had been declining for 32 consecutive months, with a 7.3% drop just last year. According to a report from the Limping Housing Data Research Institute, second-hand home prices in these 100 cities saw the biggest decline in recent years. By December 2024, the average price had fallen to 14,166 yuan per square meter, 4.2% lower than in 2018. In some areas, the price drops have been much more dramatic. At a 2024 real estate conference, Ding Zuyu, executive director of the Shanghai E-House Real Estate Research Institute, highlighted a few extreme extreme cases. In Langfang, Hebei, the average price for second-hand homes in Guorui Ecological City fell to 3,850 yuan per square meter, an 83% drop from its 2017 peak. In the Evergrande Venice community in Nantong, Jiangsu, prices dropped 71% from their 2022 high, now averaging 4,838 yuan per square meter. In Country Garden's 10 Mile Silver Beach community in Huizhou, Guangdong, prices fell 69% from their 2021 peak, now sitting at 4,682 yuan per square meter. Ding noted that since the real estate market downturn began in late 2021, second-hand home prices have fallen much more sharply than new home prices. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that new home prices have mostly returned to 2019 levels, while second-hand home prices have fallen back to 2017 levels. Not long ago, Goldman Sachs released a report predicting that home prices in China could drop by another 20 to 25% by 2025. This steep decline in property values has hit middle-class families hard. Over the past decade, many of these families invested heavily in real estate, often purchasing second or even third properties. On average, 68% of middle-class household wealth is tied to real estate. In major cities like Beijing and Shanghai, that figure climbs to 85%. When property prices were soaring, these families felt confident about their financial future. They enjoyed a sense of security, detached from the struggles of the working class and largely indifferent to the government's strict social policies. Now, with the market in freefall, many find themselves facing the same financial insecurity they once thought they had escaped. In recent years, many industries in China have been hit hard by what people call the socialist iron fist. The Chinese government has been promoting ideas like the East is rising, the West is declining, and the rise of a great power. They've taken a tough stance in international relations, known as wolf warrior diplomacy, and they've started a trade war with the United States. During the pandemic, strict zero-COVID policies put even more pressure on the economy. The negative effects of these policies are becoming more obvious, with foreign investments leaving, export shrinking, and the overall economy slowing down. As incomes decline, even middle-class families who once enjoyed a peaceful and comfortable life are starting to feel the impact. At the same time, household debt in cities has been rising, mainly because of mortgage loans. Public data shows that household debt in China has increased by 50% over the past 5 years, reaching more than 11.4 trillion US dollars by the end of last year. To give a clearer picture, let's compare China and the United States. According to data from Mars Data Research Institute, China's GDP is about 61% of the US's, but its per capita disposable income is only about 9% of the US level. Chinese household debt is roughly 2/3 of US household debt. However, the debt-to-income ratio for Chinese households has reached 116.4%, which is 1.7 times higher than that of US households. Additionally, about 76% of Chinese household debt comes from mortgage loans. Business professor Xie Tian from the University of South Carolina pointed out that the decline in China's real estate market is causing major problems. Many people are stopping their mortgage payments because the properties they bought are no longer worth what they owe. These unpaid loans become bad debts, adding to the overall debt burden and putting the financial system at risk. Economist Dr. Cheng Xiaoneng explained that more than 1/3 of Chinese households are now heavily in debt. Although home values may look high on paper, these families have to make significant monthly payments, which puts a lot of pressure on their finances. Their financial stability depends heavily on steady income. As long as wages go up, the middle class remains hopeful. However, the heavy debt load makes many people anxious about losing their jobs or facing salary cuts. That's why people refer to themselves as mortgage slaves. Right now, the Chinese government is trying to stop housing prices from falling further. If prices drop too much, the value of the collateral that banks hold will shrink, which could cause banks to go bankrupt and lead to a financial crisis. However, the government can't control second-hand housing prices, which depend on what buyers and sellers agree on. Dr. Cheng warned that if housing prices continue to fall for another 2 years, many middle-class families will end up with negative equity. This means that they will owe more on their mortgages than their homes are worth. He wrote, "The Chinese middle class is disappearing, not because they've moved up and become wealthier, but because they're becoming poorer." By 2023, people in China had already started talking about the middle class falling into poverty, calling it the rise of the miserable middle class. In fact, many middle-class families in China already own homes that are worth less than what they owe. For these families, their financial ups and downs are closely tied to the property market. Real estate has been both the source of their wealth and the cause of their losses. One woman shared a story about her friend's experience.
这个话题还是有点悲凉。
This topic feels a bit bleak. I wonder how many middle-aged men and women are going through this. Unemployment, divorce, and the devaluation of the property they once invested everything into, all while still having to pay their mortgage. I've experienced unemployment and property devaluation myself, and it already felt like hitting rock bottom. But my friend has it even worse. Years of hard work, all for nothing. He was a former colleague of mine, working in operations when I was at an internet company. He came from a rural background. Both his parents were farmers. Back then, I actually envied him. My salary was 8,000 yuan, while he was making 20,000. We both left the company eventually, and after switching jobs twice, his salary rose to 30,000 to 40,000 yuan a month. We lost touch for a while. When we reconnected, I learned he had bought an apartment in Peacock City on the outskirts of Beijing for over 1 million yuan. Not long after that, he got married. A year or two later, we talked again, and by then, he was already divorced. It took a year-long court battle to finalize the divorce. He was adamant about keeping the apartment, and the court ordered him to pay a substantial amount to his ex-wife. He also lost his job but didn't dare tell his family. He struggled on his own in Beijing for more than a year trying to find work. Meanwhile, housing prices around Beijing had plummeted. The apartment he bought on the outskirts barely saw any use, couldn't be rented out, and yet the mortgage payments continued. Feeling stuck in his job search, he spent over 100,000 yuan to pursue an MBA. Even after earning the degree, he still couldn't find a job. Going back to his hometown wasn't a solution. His internet tech skills were outdated after so many years, and he couldn't rely on his family for help. Staying in the city wasn't working either, as job opportunities remained scarce. Now he's living in a small rental in Beijing, getting by with whatever part-time gigs he can find. At least he doesn't have kids. He only needs to worry about feeding himself. Now that both the internet and real estate bubbles have burst, it feels like all that time spent studying theoretical knowledge and all those years of endless overtime using his expertise to earn money and invest in property have amounted to nothing. Add to that an unhappy marriage, and it's been one blow after another. From what I've seen among friends and relatives, many middle-aged people seem to live with a deep sense of helplessness. Pushing through is their only option. The number of court-auctioned properties in China continues to rise, fueling concerns about mortgage defaults. Veteran journalist Zhao Lanjian remarked that this isn't just about a few bankrupt individuals, it's the collapse of the entire social credit system, and anyone could become the next victim. Zhao shared a video about foreclosed properties. In the video, a family whose home had been foreclosed resisted the forced eviction with all their might, desperately trying to hold on to their home. Zhao admitted that watching the video left him deeply saddened. He wrote, "The economic crisis is sweeping across China. More and more people are being crushed by debt, their homes foreclosed, and their families torn apart. They have no way out, only struggle. They've lost everything, and losing their home means complete homelessness, so they fight with all their strength just to survive. This isn't just one family's tragedy. It's a harsh reality faced by countless ordinary people in China." He pointed out that the number of court-auctioned properties has surged in recent years. In 2023 alone, nearly 800,000 such properties were listed nationwide, a more than 30% increase from the previous year. Behind each auctioned property was once a warm home, now a heartbreak for those being evicted. He wrote, "These foreclosures are mostly concentrated in smaller cities, but major cities aren't immune either. Falling property prices and lower bank valuations drive auction prices even lower, dragging down regional real estate markets and pushing more mortgage holders into negative equity. For those who have already lost their homes due to court rulings, their plight is even more tragic." As of November 6, 2023, data from China's Public Information Network for Enforcement showed that the country had 8.5 million individuals labeled as dishonest debtors. After that date, the data was no longer updated. Before the suspension, 2,000 to 3,000 new dishonest individuals were added daily. Some financial analysts estimate that the real number has since exceeded 26 million, with daily increases of over 10,000. If all overdue debtors are included, the figure might reach 370 million, with 68 million individuals having payment delays exceeding 6 months, making them high-risk individuals in the financial system. Zhao stressed that this isn't just about a handful of bankrupt individuals, it's the collapse of the entire social credit framework. Official statistics indicate that by 2024, the number of individuals with court-enforced debt has reached several million, and the figure is projected to grow about 10% annually through 2025. Zhao described this dishonest debtor group as massive, noting that many of these people aren't unwilling to pay their debts, they've simply been cornered by the economic climate. While court rulings can demand repayment, these individuals are already destitute and incapable of fulfilling those obligations. Zhao continued, "These days, I've seen too many stories like this. Families forcibly evicted, elderly people left homeless after losing their foreclosed properties, and individuals who've lost everything yet still bear heavy debts. They aren't criminals or bad people, they were once ordinary citizens, now pushed to society's margins." He concluded bluntly, "No matter what tactics the Chinese Communist Party employs, it cannot fundamentally change China's current social predicament. As long as Xi Jinping and his administration remain in power, and as long as these self-serving interest groups continue to manipulate the country, any hope of real change will remain an illusion. Expecting these entrenched elites and corrupt parasites to reform themselves is nothing more than wishful thinking." Li Hengqing, an economist at the Institute of Information Strategy in the United States, believes that mortgage defaults are an inevitable consequence amid China's economic downturn. As the economy continues to deteriorate, more court-auctioned properties will inevitably surface. Li explained, when these homeowners initially bought their properties, they typically made a 20% down payment, with the remaining 80% financed through loans. Now property values have dropped by more than 20%, creating a huge gap between market value and the outstanding loan amounts. Coupled with rising job market pressures, many people are left with no choice but to stop paying their mortgages. Davy J. Huang, a Chinese economist based in the United States, pointed out that as the number of auctioned properties surges, some banks are even demanding borrowers cover the difference between the auction price and the original loan amount to minimize bad debts. This adds further uncertainty to the market, as potential buyers become more cautious about purchasing new homes. Huang warned that this trend increases systemic risks for banks. Huang said, "The rise in auctioned properties signals an uptick in non-performing loans. These properties are typically sold at significant discounts, which accelerates the downward pressure on home prices." Current affairs commentator Henry Lee described China's real estate collapse as the inevitable outcome of its development model. For more than 2 decades, local governments relied heavily on land sales to sustain their finances, with land transfer fees accounting for 40 to 50% of fiscal revenue. In some regions like Zhejiang, Jiangsu, and Anhui, this figure has long exceeded 50%. In cities like Hangzhou, Suzhou, and Guiyang, land sales once contributed over 60% of local revenue. Li explained that nearly 70% of housing costs in China come from land and taxes, with this proportion even higher in major cities. For years, the government, developers, and banks colluded to inflate property prices, enticing ordinary people to pour their savings into real estate. As a result, household wealth has effectively drained. Now, with the economy in decline and household income shrinking, many families can no longer afford their mortgage payments. Forced to default, their homes are auctioned off, driving prices even lower. As home values plummet below outstanding mortgage balances, more borrowers stop payments, creating a vicious cycle. This process has pushed many into bankruptcy and homelessness, while numerous properties sit vacant. Ultimately, Li said, this is just another instance of the public's wealth being harvested by those in power. In China, it's not just the middle class struggling to protect their assets. Even societal elites without ties to the political elite find it difficult. Professor Li Xiaomin from Old Dominion University's Department of Economics explained that the Chinese Communist Party maintains absolute control over all resources in the country. From birth to education, housing, employment, and business, citizens, even billionaires, must navigate CCP approval. Li cited Jack Ma's downfall as a prime example. Alibaba founder Jack Ma, once China's richest man, was publicly reprimanded after criticizing the CCP. He quickly realized that the wealth he thought he owned was never truly his. In a system like this, no one can stand independently of the party. Prominent Chinese economist Wu Jinglian echoed this sentiment, noting the vulnerability of China's middle class. China's middle class is still immature. They don't fully grasp where their core interests lie. Many believe that as long as they have a house, a nice car, and a stable family life, everything will be fine. But in a flawed system, no individual's future is secure. The prolonged stagnation in China's real estate market is accelerating the return to poverty for the middle class. Plummeting property values, mass layoffs, and rising financial distress are pushing countless families into crisis, with some falling apart under the strain. Mortgage defaults are becoming widespread, driving up banks' non-performing loans and destabilizing the social credit system, where the risk of financial collapse looms larger. Despite the worsening situation, the CCP's regulatory efforts have yielded little success. As the economic and social crisis deepens, the leadership remains preoccupied with internal power struggles, potential military action against Taiwan, and its standoff with democratic nations. In Li Xiaomin's view, if the situation deteriorates further and desperate citizens see no path forward, widespread resistance could erupt, potentially causing the CCP's rule to collapse abruptly.